In recent times, there's been more stress on getting kids to take the upper level math and science classes. This means that there's more teachers being pushed to teach upper level classes earlier, especially in rural areas. I was at Rice AP Institute about 4 years ago, and there were all these people there, 40 people, but about half of them were newly out of college, 1 to 2 years out, and they were, congratulations, you're the AP physics teacher. And they were scared to death. They knew what they knew from their college classes, but they didn't know those nuts and bolts things. How do you do problem solving at the board in front of students? What happens if you get stuck? How do you deal with the fact that students come with preconceived fears and notions about your course on the first day? And these are the things that they didn't know. And so I started taking notes of all these things that they were telling me that were scaring them, and talking to other teachers who've been around these teachers as they developed their skills and saw what their fears did and what their uncertainties did to them, and took the notes and compiled it and started writing the book. It's pretty holistic. It touches on study habits and strategies, student psychology, how you deal with teenagers. Some of the worst parts of being a teenager comes out in science and math classrooms, probably because no matter what we do, at a certain level we wind up having to teach nuts and bolts. And it's those things that are the biggest challenge to a teacher, to keep the student focused on what they're telling them and what they're doing in a situation like that. So strategies on how you handle that, strategies on how you do assessment, trying to get a student to understand why they do labs. That's always an interesting thing. Sometimes ask students why they do labs, and you'll get some of the funniest answers. Because the teacher told me, because I'll learn something. Rarely do they really understand why they do laboratories. So there's a whole section on stressing to students why they do laboratories as a way of getting them to do better laboratories. I actually came from the engineering world first. I've only been teaching about 12 years in secondary. So most of my experience previously had been sitting in front of NASA engineers who were, waiting on everything I said with bated breath. Now you're dealing with high school students who are doing this and this and this and trying desperately to find anything to do but listen to you. My first year, that was a little hard to get used to. So I understand from that perspective what these new teachers go through when they walk into a classroom full of students for the first time. It can be, that aspect of it can be, I think, the most daunting thing, with the exception of maybe the fear of getting in front of a student, work a problem, and get stuck. For two reasons. A lot of the same things that the physical science teacher runs into, the math teacher runs into also. This preconceived fear and notions about the class, am I going to get up in front of these students, start working a problem, get stuck? And if you do that, especially in front of GT students, that can be a very, very bad thing. There are some GT students who will let you know in certain terms that they don't think you know what you're doing if you do that too often. So one of the biggest things in the book is addressing problem solving. There's a system for solving problems I developed over about a 7-year period and tested rigorously with students in tutoring situations and in classroom situations. It's very systematic. What I did was I watched students solve problems, and I began to take notes on where they got stuck. What things did they do wrong? And so each step of this method addresses one of those issues. And then I made it so that they all fit together in a nice consecutive sequential form. And it's tested out very well. Students don't like it at first because it requires them to write more. But once they buy into it, they find that they're actually, one, doing problems faster despite the fact that they're writing more, because they don't get stuck. They don't stare at the paper the whole time. And two, they're getting the right answer more often, which is always the most important thing anyway. It can be used for anything from Algebra 1 up to calculus. It's not a textbook, so I'm not teaching math in it, but what I'm doing is teaching a sequence of steps that they can use to do a math problem. And in much the same way, the method I use for problem solving in the physical sciences works for math. Matter of fact, some of the examples in the problem-solving section of the book are in mathematics. Well, one piece of advice I gave, because we took this AP Institute in, I guess it was April, I suggested to all those teachers that really weren't sure about their knowledge of physics to go and take a course during the summer, just to get, just to get your brain set to get practice doing more problem solving, to wrap your brain around the concepts so that you understand them well, and just do as much problem solving as possible. If they assign 10 problems, try to do 20. It's a lot of work, but at least when you walk in that September and those students are facing you, you'll have confidence that you're not going to sit up at the board, put a problem up, and not be able to do it. The other thing I recommended to them always was, if you're going to go and put a problem up on the board, do it ahead of time. Make sure you've done it first, especially that first year or two of teaching. It's a lot better to have done it ahead of time and have notes in front of you that you can look at in case you just got stuck on something, than to be up there trying to do a problem for the first time ever, get stuck, and not be able to go anywhere with it. Again, the GT students will let you know it when you get stuck like that. I went, I guess I'm one of these people who get bored easily, because I had multiple, I started out as a working theoretical physicist, and I did my graduate work, PhD at University of Texas in physics, and did work with gravity and all kinds of things. And then I started getting to the point where I wanted to do hands-on. I wanted to be able to hold something that I was working on. So I moved from there to engineering, and eventually wound up working for Lockheed Engineering and Sciences Company and NASA. Did that for several years, and then worked for the FAA as a project manager for a while, and then ran my own company for several years before I sold it. The nice thing about doing all that is I found that many of the things that I learned in engineering, I've actually been able to apply to education design, like the problem-solving method. Much of how I put it together came from things that I had learned as an engineer about how processes work. Students want to, when they solve a problem, go straight to the equation. It's amazing. If you haven't trained them, they'll read the problem. The minute they read the problem, it's automatically writing down the equation. Well, that means that they may not understand the concepts in the equation. They may not understand the principles behind the equation, and they certainly may not understand the process of using it, and so they get the wrong answer. I'm trying to stress to the students that there's a proper order of learning things: concept, principle, process, then equation. And I think if they understand the concepts better, the principles better, and they understand the process for using the equation, they're going to write down the equation with the knowledge of what the equation means, not just something they're going to plug numbers in or do algebra on.